It's a strange thing, but some people feel most exhausted, not when life is chaotic, but when it finally becomes quiet, because silence leaves them alone with the tension they've been carrying for years, like armor that never quite comes off. Maybe you know that feeling, when nothing is wrong, yet your body still waits for something to break. What if that constant vigilance isn't protecting you anymore, but gently asking to be released? And what if safety isn't a place you reach, but something you learn to feel from the inside out? There's a quiet belief many people hold without realizing it, that staying guarded is the only way to avoid being hurt again. It sounds reasonable, even wise, until the guard begins to keep out warmth along with danger. The truth is softer than we expect. The heart doesn't heal by staying locked, but by discovering it can open without shattering. Relief doesn't come from controlling everything around you, but from loosening what you've been holding within. And once that loosening begins, something surprisingly gentle starts to grow in its place. This story is for the part of you that's tired of bracing, tired of scanning every room for hidden storms. It's for the quiet hope that wonders if peace might be possible without constantly defending yourself, not through force, not through pretending to be fearless, but through small acts of kindness toward your own guarded heart. You won't be asked to drop everything at once, only to notice what it might feel like to breathe a little deeper. Because sometimes, the moment you stop gripping the armor is the moment you realize you don't need it as much as you thought. He had grown so used to bracing himself that even quiet mornings felt suspicious, as if peace were just a polite disguise. When the kettle hummed softly on the stove, his shoulders still hovered near his ears, waiting for something to go wrong. It wasn't that danger was present. It was that his body had forgotten how to stand down. Friends would say, "Relax, nothing's happening," and he'd nod, though his chest kept watch like a night guard who never clocks out. Somewhere along the way, calm had begun to feel less like safety and more like the silence before a storm. He carried this vigilance the way an old soldier might carry a dented shield, even to places where no battle had ever been fought. At a cafe, when laughter rose too loudly, his fingers tightened around the cup before he even noticed. A delayed reply to a message felt like the opening line of rejection, though no one had actually left. His mind stitched stories from thin air, always preparing him for disappointment, as if rehearsal might soften the blow. Truth be told, he couldn't remember when he had last taken a full breath without checking for trouble first. Protecting himself had become a craft, almost impressive in its precision, though quietly exhausting. He knew exactly how to smile without revealing anything tender, how to change subjects before feelings surfaced. People described him as calm, steady, composed, words that sounded peaceful but felt strangely lonely inside. Connection brushed past him like a passing train he never quite boarded, warm but unreachable. And sometimes, late at night, he wondered if safety had slowly turned into a very well-decorated cage. There were moments when he sensed the cost most clearly, when kind words made him uneasy instead of comforted. Compliments slid off him as if they had nowhere to land, while criticism lingered like a stain that wouldn't wash out. He'd catch himself rehearsing conversations that hadn't happened, preparing defenses no one had asked for. It was tiring, this constant readiness, like holding a door shut long after the wind had died down. Still, the idea of letting go felt risky, as if the door might fly open and sweep everything away. One evening, watching the sky dim through his window, he felt a quiet question settle beside him. What if safety wasn't something that arrived from outside, like a lock or a warning sign? What if it could be built gently, somewhere behind the ribs, where no one else needed to guard it? The thought didn't solve anything, not yet, but it softened his grip just enough to notice the ache in his hands. And in that small loosening, something unfamiliar stirred, a hint that the story might not end inside those walls. In the days that followed, he kept returning to that quiet question, turning it over like a smooth stone in his pocket. He began to notice how quickly he labeled any softness in himself as a liability, something to hide before it could be used against him. If his voice trembled, he cleared his throat. If his eyes stung, he blinked it away and reached for distraction. Somewhere deep down, he had learned that vulnerability was a crack in the armor, not a doorway. Yet the more tightly he sealed those cracks, the heavier the armor seemed to grow. One afternoon, he caught his reflection in a shop window and paused, struck by how tired his eyes looked. Not the tiredness of sleep, but the kind that comes from carrying invisible weight for too long. He rested his palm against his chest, almost absent-mindedly, and noticed how tense the muscles were beneath. On impulse, he tried something small. One slow breath in, then out. as if loosening a knot no one else could see. Nothing dramatic happened, but the air felt a little warmer on the way back in. It dawned on him, gently, that maybe strength wasn't the same as constant defense. Perhaps it was the quiet courage to set the shield down for a moment and trust the ground beneath his feet. He imagined what it might feel like if his heart didn't have to scan every room for threats. The idea felt fragile, almost tender, like holding a bird that might startle if gripped too tightly. Still, he didn't push it away this time. He simply let the thought rest there, breathing with him. As the days passed, he experimented in ways so small no one else would have noticed. When a friend spoke kindly, he resisted the urge to deflect, and instead let the words linger for a heartbeat longer. When anxiety prickled, he pressed his fingertips together and whispered inwardly, "It's all right. You're safe enough." To his surprise, the world didn't collapse when he stopped bracing for it. If anything, it seemed to lean closer, as though relieved he had softened his stance. A quiet understanding began to form, that peace might grow in the spaces where fear was no longer in charge. Not because danger vanished, but because his heart no longer treated every shadow as a threat. He sensed that lowering his defenses wasn't surrender, it was a kind of homecoming. And though he didn't yet know how to live that way fully, the possibility hovered nearby, patient and steady. It was around then that someone unexpected stepped into his path, carrying a calm he couldn't quite explain. Long before that unexpected meeting, his life had been shaped by a series of quiet fractures no one else quite saw. Promises had dissolved without explanation. Trust had slipped through his hands like water he couldn't hold. He stopped telling the full story of himself after noticing how easily it could be misunderstood. It felt safer to keep conversations light, to laugh at the right moments, to leave before anyone looked too closely. Some nights, though, the silence in his apartment pressed in like a question he didn't know how to answer. He had learned to measure distance carefully, the way one might test ice before stepping forward. When people grew too curious, he'd retreat behind polite humor or sudden busyness. It wasn't that he didn't want closeness, quite the opposite, really, but longing had become tangled with caution. He told himself he preferred solitude, though it often felt more like an unfinished sentence than a choice. Even warmth, when it appeared, carried a faint echo of something that might be taken away. There were small moments when his guard slipped without permission. Watching strangers hug at a train station, he felt a flicker of envy he quickly disguised as indifference. A kind message would sit unanswered for hours while he debated how much of himself it was safe to reveal. He'd reread his replies before sending them, trimming away anything that sounded too open, too real. Connection for him had become a careful negotiation rather than something natural and easy. Underneath it all was a tired longing he rarely admitted, even to himself. He missed the feeling of resting in someone's presence without calculating the risks. He missed laughing without wondering if it would be used against him later somehow. Most of all, he missed the simple relief of not having to hold everything together alone. It was a quiet ache, the kind that doesn't shout but never quite leaves. On evenings when the sky turned the color of faded ink, he sometimes placed a hand over his heart again. He would breathe slowly, imagining, just for a moment, what it might feel like to be unguarded and still okay. The image never lasted long. Habit would pull him back into vigilance soon enough. But lately, those brief moments had begun to feel less like fantasies and more like distant memories. And it was during one of those fragile pauses that he noticed the object he had been carrying all along. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, the faint metallic weight he felt whenever he straightened his back. But the more he paid attention, the clearer it became. He was wearing something, unseen yet unmistakable. A suit of old armor, dented in places, polished thin where his hands had rubbed it over the years. It covered his chest most tightly, as if protecting the exact place that had once hurt the most. No one else reacted to it, which somehow made its presence feel even more real. The armor had its uses, of course. It had carried him through storms he wasn't sure he'd survived otherwise. Harsh words struck it and fell away. Disappointment echoed against it without breaking through. In crowded rooms, it made him feel less exposed, less likely to shatter under invisible pressure. But it also dulled everything gentle. The warmth of a hug, the softness of kind eyes. Protection, he realized, had quietly become a barrier between him and the very comfort he needed. It was exhausting to wear, though he'd grown so accustomed to the strain he rarely questioned it. By evening his shoulders ached, as if they had been holding up something far heavier than posture alone. Sometimes he imagined unfastening it, just for a minute, but the thought made his breath hitch. What if removing it even slightly allowed old pain to rush back in? So he kept it on, tightening the straps whenever doubt whispered too loudly. He began to notice how the armor shaped his movements in subtle ways. He sat a little farther from people, laughed a little more cautiously, left gatherings a little earlier. Even joy seemed filtered through layers of metal, arriving muted and delayed. There was a loneliness in realizing he had built his own fortress and misplaced the door. Still, he couldn't deny that the armor had once been a form of mercy, however heavy. One afternoon, as sunlight caught the imaginary edges of it just so, he wondered who had first helped him put it on. He couldn't remember the exact moment, only a series of small hurts that had quietly assembled it piece by piece. If it had been built gradually, perhaps it could also be loosened the same way. The idea felt both hopeful and unsettling, like discovering a hidden latch on a wall you assumed was solid. And as he traced the outline of the chest plate with uncertain fingers, a calm voice behind him spoke his name. He turned, startled but not afraid, and found an older woman standing a few steps away, as if she had been there all along. Her presence was quiet, the kind that didn't demand attention yet somehow softened the air around her. She didn't stare at the armor or ask intrusive questions. She simply offered a small, knowing smile. For a moment he waited for advice, instructions, anything that might feel like pressure, but none came. Instead, she sat on the nearby bench and patted the empty space beside her, as though inviting, not insisting. He hesitated, then lowered himself carefully, half expecting her to comment on the invisible weight he carried. But she spoke of ordinary things, the way the evening light lingered on the trees, the scent of rain on warm pavement. Her voice moved slowly, like someone who trusted silence to do half the work. He noticed his shoulders easing down a fraction, surprised at the unfamiliar sensation of not being examined. It felt oddly safe, this simple companionship without expectation. After a while, she glanced toward him, not at the armor, but at his face, as if that were what mattered. "You've been carrying something for a long time," she said gently, leaving the sentence open like an unfinished bridge. He exhaled before he realized he was holding his breath, the sound shaky but honest. No one had acknowledged his effort to stay strong without also urging him to drop it immediately. Her patience felt like a permission he didn't know he'd been waiting for. She told him that safety doesn't grow from forcing doors open, but from knowing they can stay closed until you're ready. Trust, she explained softly, is less like a leap and more like learning to stand without gripping the walls. As she spoke, she placed her palm lightly over her own heart and took one slow breath, inviting him to mirror it. He did, awkward at first, then steadier, noticing how the armor didn't resist as much as he expected. For the first time, he sensed that it might respond to kindness rather than tension. When he looked back at her, she was watching the horizon, as if giving him space even in conversation. "You don't have to take it off," she added quietly. "Just loosen one strap when it feels safe enough." The suggestion was so gentle it slipped past his defenses before fear could object. He touched the edge of the chest plate, feeling a faint give where there had always been rigidity, and something in his chest stirred. Not panic, not relief exactly, but the fragile beginning of trust. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, I created an ebook called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours and More 2 bonus for you. It's for those who want to let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. The next time they met, she didn't ask whether he had loosened the strap. She simply greeted him as if progress were not a test. They walked slowly along a quiet path, gravel crunching beneath their steps like a steady heartbeat. He admitted, almost sheepishly, that he had tried what she suggested for a few seconds before tightening it again. She nodded, not disappointed, just thoughtful, as though he had described something entirely expected. "Kindness toward yourself counts," she said, "even when it lasts only a moment." She paused near a low stone wall and rested her hands on it, grounding herself before speaking again. "Letting your guard down isn't a single act," she explained softly. "It's a series of small permissions." Then she mimed unfastening an invisible clasp near her shoulder, exaggerating the motion with a hint of warm humor. He couldn't help but smile, the image so ordinary it made the idea feel less intimidating. For the first time, vulnerability didn't sound like a dramatic collapse, but like loosening a tight collar. Encouraged, he tried it there beside her, fingers trembling slightly as they found the familiar edge of the strap. He eased it just enough to feel space between the metal and his chest, a breath slipping in where none had before. A flicker of fear rose, quick and sharp, but it didn't overwhelm him the way he had expected. Instead, it was followed by something quieter, relief, like cool air entering a room that had been sealed too long. He realized his heart wasn't rushing to escape. It was simply stretching after being held still. She watched without intruding, her presence steady as a hand hovering near, but not touching. "See?" she murmured, as if speaking to a startled animal learning it was no longer in danger. "Your heart knows how to breathe when it's given a little room." He placed his palm against the loosened plate, feeling the faint rhythm beneath, unsure whether he wanted to laugh or cry. For once he didn't rush to decide. He just stayed there, letting the moment exist. As they turned back toward the path, he noticed the armor felt slightly lighter, not gone, but less absolute. The world around him seemed sharper too, colors warmer, sounds closer, as if distance had quietly shrunk. He wondered how many pieces could be loosened before the weight stopped defining him. The thought was both hopeful and unnerving, like stepping onto a bridge that appeared only as you moved forward. And though he couldn't yet imagine walking without the armor at all, he sensed he might not always need it to feel safe. In the weeks that followed, he practiced loosening the armor in moments that felt almost ordinary. With a cashier who smiled kindly, he let his voice soften instead of rushing through the exchange. When a friend shared something vulnerable, he resisted the urge to retreat and simply listened, present and steady. Each time, fear flickered first, a reflex that hadn't yet learned the war was over. But warmth arrived soon after, quiet and surprising, like sunlight finding its way through a narrow gap. He began to notice that openness didn't have to be dramatic to be real. Sometimes it was just admitting, "That hurt more than I expected," instead of shrugging it off. Other times it meant staying in the room when embarrassment flushed his cheeks, breathing slowly until it passed. He discovered that people didn't recoil from his honesty. If anything, they leaned closer. It felt strange, this gentle gravity pulling connection toward him instead of pushing it away. Of course, there were moments when the old instincts surged back without warning. A careless comment would strike the armor, and his first impulse was still to tighten every strap at once. But now he paused, placing a hand over the dented plate and taking one deliberate breath. He would imagine warm light seeping through the cracks, softening the rigid edges from within. The tension didn't vanish instantly, yet it loosened enough for him to remain instead of disappearing. Gradually, the armor changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. It didn't fall away or shatter. It simply grew lighter, as though shedding layers he no longer needed. He could move more freely, laugh without the echo of metal around his ribs, rest without bracing for impact. The world seemed less like a battlefield and more like a landscape he could actually walk through. And in quiet moments, he even forgot he was wearing the armor at all. One evening, as he sat across from someone who mattered to him, he felt the familiar flutter of risk. The conversation drifted toward something honest, something that would once have sent him searching for an exit. Instead, he stayed, fingers brushing the loosened strap as if reminding himself he had a choice now. His voice came out softer than usual, but it didn't break, and the person across from him didn't turn away. It was then he realized the armor wasn't disappearing. He was simply learning when he no longer needed it. Not long after, life offered him a moment that felt like a quiet test, though no one announced it as such. Someone close to him spoke with unexpected honesty, their words trembling at the edges. He felt the old instinct to retreat, to nod politely and change the subject before emotions deepened. His fingers brushed the armor's edge, sensing how easily he could seal himself off again. For a heartbeat, he considered it, the familiar safety of distance. Instead, he stayed where he was, letting the silence stretch without rushing to fill it. He placed one hand lightly over his chest, a small gesture hidden beneath the table. Slow breath in, slower breath out, as if reminding his body that this wasn't a threat. The armor didn't tighten. It simply waited, as though curious what he would choose. So he chose to remain open, even with the tremor of uncertainty still present. When he finally spoke, his words were simple, unpolished, and entirely real. He admitted he didn't always know the right thing to say, but he was there and not going anywhere. To his surprise, the moment didn't fracture under the weight of truth. If anything, it softened, like snow settling instead of shattering on impact. He noticed the other person's shoulders relax, mirroring a calm he hadn't realized he carried. There was a quiet dignity in not hiding, in allowing himself to be seen without armor gleaming in defense. He realized authenticity wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, like a candle that didn't flicker at every draft. Even when discomfort lingered, it felt cleaner than the hollow relief of avoidance. For the first time, trust felt like something he was participating in, not just hoping for. And somewhere beneath the metal, his heart beat with a confidence that didn't need to prove itself. Later, walking home beneath a sky rinsed clean by evening, he sensed how much had shifted. The world hadn't become safer overnight, yet he felt less hunted by possibilities. He paused, loosening another strap almost absent-mindedly, as if it were simply part of breathing now. A quiet thought crossed his mind. Maybe safety wasn't the absence of risk, but the presence of steadiness. And as that idea settled in, he wondered how many others carried armor they had forgotten how to remove. Noticing the change in him, the mentor one day invited him to sit quietly beside her again, no urgency in her tone. She asked him to close his eyes for a moment and simply observe where his body still felt guarded. At first he wasn't sure what she meant. Then he noticed the familiar tightness in his jaw, the lift in his shoulders. "Your armor speaks through your muscles," she said gently, as if sharing a secret meant only for him. He nodded, surprised by how obvious it felt once he paid attention. She guided him to take a slow breath in through his nose, holding it just long enough to notice the pause. Then she encouraged him to exhale as if fogging a window, soft and unforced. With each breath, he imagined loosening one invisible clasp, not removing the armor, just easing its grip. A warmth spread across his chest, subtle but unmistakable, like sunlight reaching a hidden corner. He realized safety could begin as a sensation, not just an idea. They practiced for less than a minute, though time seemed to slow in that small pocket of stillness. She suggested he try it whenever tension crept in, before answering a difficult message, after a sharp remark. No rituals, no special setting, just a quiet pause wherever he happened to be. He appreciated the simplicity. It felt like something he could actually carry into ordinary life. For once, healing didn't seem complicated or out of reach. Later, alone, he tested the practice while standing at his kitchen sink, hands damp with warm water. He noticed the stiffness in his back, the way his chest still braced out of habit. One breath, then another, imagining the armor resting more lightly against him. The room didn't change, yet it felt less constricting, as if space had quietly expanded. He caught himself smiling, a small private victory no one else needed to witness. When he opened his eyes, the world looked the same, but felt different in his body. He sensed that safety wasn't something granted by circumstances, but cultivated in moments like this. Each pause was like setting the armor down on a nearby chair, just long enough to remember who he was without it. He wondered how many years he had waited for permission to do something so simple, and with that thought, a quiet readiness stirred, as though he were approaching a doorway he hadn't noticed before. The next time he met the mentor, there was a stillness about him that hadn't been there before. Not the guarded stillness of someone waiting for impact, but the calm of someone no longer scanning the horizon. She noticed it immediately, of course, though she said nothing at first, just shared the quiet with him. After a while, he admitted that he had begun leaving the armor unfastened more often than not. It hadn't made him fragile. If anything, he felt steadier, like a tree bending instead of bracing to snap. She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't congratulate but simply acknowledges what already is. "Protection isn't meant to be permanent," she said softly, tracing a circle in the dust with her shoe. "Walls keep danger out, but they also keep life from coming in." He watched the line she'd drawn, thinking how easy it would be to step across it if he chose. For the first time, he understood that safety could live inside him, not just around him. As the sun lowered, he reached up and rested his hands on the chest plate one last time. Instead of gripping it, he let his fingers relax, feeling the space between metal and skin. There was no dramatic moment, no clatter of armor falling to the ground. He simply allowed it to loosen until it felt more like a memory than a necessity. His breath moved freely, steady and unhurried, as if it had been waiting for this permission. Walking home, he noticed how open the evening felt. Doors ajar, windows glowing, laughter drifting outward. Nothing about the world had fundamentally changed, yet it no longer felt like something to defend against. He passed a reflective window and saw not a man encased in protection, but someone quietly at ease. The absence of constant defense didn't leave him exposed. It left him available to warmth, to connection, to rest. For the first time in years, he felt protected by his own peace rather than by anything he wore. Later, he sat by his window as night settled gently over the city, hands resting loosely in his lap. He imagined the armor beside him, not discarded with bitterness, but set down with gratitude. Outside, a breeze moved through the trees without resistance, leaves whispering in quiet trust. He realized that true safety wasn't built from barriers, but from the steady knowing that he could face whatever came. And as the lights dimmed one by one, his heart remained open, warm, and unafraid of the dark.